Welcome to video number 3 for Chapter 14, Forging the National Economy. British investors in 1750 perfected a series of machines for mass production of textiles. They harnessed steam to usher in the modern factory system of the Industrial Revolution. This was a spectacular transformation in agricultural production, as well as methods of transportation and communication. The factory system slowly spread from Britain, which was nicknamed the world's workshop. Why was America slow to industrialize? Land was cheap, labor was scarce, and money for investment capital was scarce as well. Samuel Slater is known as the father of the factory system. He memorized the plans on how to build the factory machinery and then escaped to America. He won the backing of capitalist Moses Brown, and he reconstructed the essential apparatus and parts in 1790. And this put together the first efficient machinery for spinning cotton thread in America. But the problem was how to access the cotton fiber. But Eli Whitney's cotton gin solved this problem. The effects of the cotton gin were very impactful. Planters cleared more and more land for cotton as a result, and so the cotton kingdom began to push westward. There was still continuing insatiable demand for cotton, which basically had the South cling more tightly to slavery than it did even before the invention. So the Yankee machines ended up putting out avalanches of textiles and being very good at production. And America's Industrial Revolution first blossomed in the industry of making cotton textiles for clothes. The factories first flourished in New England and then branched out to New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. The South, though, grew increasingly wedded to growing cotton, and there was very little manufacturing developing. Most of the capital of the South, meaning money, was invested in slaves, and local consumers, for the most part, were desperately poor. New England is favored as the industrial center because of the stony soil that made farming very difficult, and so manufacturing as an industry was attractive. There was a dense population which provided labor and markets. They had seaports which provided easy import of raw materials and export of finished products, and rivers provided abundant water power. So by 1860, greater than 400 million pounds of southern cotton was pouring into the mills in the New England area, but mostly specifically in New England. This is a picture showing Little Germany in Cincinnati's Over-the-Rhine district in 1887. This is a picture of Francis Cabot Lowell's mill in Waltham, Massachusetts, which was basically very famous for its efficiency, and it combined phases of production, including spinning and weaving, all under one roof. As a result of these factories being able to produce fabric, a lot of women from other communities could easily buy fabric for their clothing. This is another picture of the Lowell Mill. As the factory system flourished, it embraced other industries as well. So the contribution of Eli Whitney's interchangeable parts invention was actually attributed or applied to the manufacture of firearms. So this becomes the basis of mass production and assembly line methods. So interchangeable parts basically meant that there were many pieces that made up the firearm, and instead of having the firearm break and having to replace the entire firearm, then you could replace just a piece, and that's what makes the factory system possible. So basically, it gave the North the factories that ensured the military preponderance over the South. And Eli Whitney had actually invented the cotton gin intending to reduce slavery, but ironically, he ended up increasing slavery and fueling its development in the South. This is a picture of Eli Whitney's cotton gin. The sewing machine was also an invention during this time period, and it was invented by Elias Howe in 1846 and perfected by Isaac Singer. This brought a strong boost to northern industrialization and basically becomes the foundation of ready-made clothing. And so as a result of having a sewing machine, you could now move sewing from your private home to a factory and begin to make large-scale production. Each new invention stimulated still more imaginative inventions. So in the decade ending in 1800, there are only 306 patents that were registered, but by 1860 there were over 28,000 patents on the books. Key changes in form and legal status of business organizations happened during this time period as well. The principle of limited liability aided concentration of capital, and the Boston Associates ended up being created by 15 Boston families as a result. So the laws of free incorporation basically meant that businessmen could create corporations without applying for individual charters from the state legislatures. Samuel B. Morse was an inventor during this time period as well. He invented the telegraph by securing $30,000 worth of money of funding from Congress to experiment with the telegraph. And in 1844, they strung a 40-mile wire from Washington to Baltimore, and the first message was sent from one end to the other, and basically the message said, "What hath God wrought?" By the time of London's World Fair in 1851, American products were prominent among the world's financial and commercial wonders. Fairgoers crowded into the Crystal Palace to see inventions such as McCormick's Reaper, the Morse telegraph, Colt's firearm, and Charles Goodyear's vulcanized rubber goods. The factory system created an acute labor problem as well, as manufacturing previously had been done in the home with master craftsmen and apprentices working together. The Industrial Revolution changed this personal association into an impersonal ownership of factories and made these really large spindle cities which were surrounded by lots and lots of what were called wage slaves. The workers' conditions, they worked very long hours and their wages were very low. Their meals were very skimpy, and they didn't have a lot of time to eat. Workers toiled in unsanitary conditions which were poorly ventilated, poorly lighted, and poorly heated. But they were forbidden to form unions to try to raise wages or negotiate better working conditions. So only 24 recorded strikes had happened before 1835. There was also an exploitation of child labor during this time period. In 1820, many of the nation's industrial toilers were children under 10. They were considered victims of the factory system. Children were often mentally blighted, emotionally starved, physically stunted, and brutally whipped in special whipping rooms when they did something wrong. Slater's mill in 1791 was the first machine where 7 boys and 2 girls operated the machine, and they were all under 12. There were also lots of adult wage workers in the 1820s to the 1830s, and many states granted the laboring man the right to vote as well. And they tried to lighten the burden through working men's parties. And many workers were loyal to the Democratic Party of Andrew Jackson. But besides the 10-hour workday, higher wages, and tolerable working conditions, workers demanded public education and an end to imprisonment for debt. Employers fought the 10-hour workday, saying that it would lessen their production and increase their costs and make the workers feel like they weren't producing as much as they should be. Laborers would have so much leisure time, they said, that the devil would lead them to mischief. And so in 1840, President Van Buren established a 10-hour workday for federal employees on public works. In later years, many states began to reduce the hours of their own working people in a similar fashion. Day laborers tried to improve their situation as well, and their strongest weapon was strikes. Dozens of strikes erupted in the 1830s and 1840s as workers sought higher wages, 10-hour days, and goals such as the right to smoke on the job. Workers lost more strikes than they won, and the employers often imported strike breakers to cross the picket line. Labor raised its voice against the immigrants because the immigrants a lot of times were used as strike breakers. Labor's effort to organize started with some 30,000 trade unionists in 1830, and it declined as a result of a severe depression in 1837. But then it won a promising legal victory in 1842 in the Commonwealth versus Hunt, where the Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled that unions were not illegal conspiracies and that they provided methods that were honorable and peaceful. So the case did not legalize the right to strike, only to unionize. And we'll discuss labor unions and the working conditions in the factories during the Industrial Revolution in our classroom discussions.